Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Emily. I'm filling in for Christine today, but I am going to turn it over to Laura. She is the consultant from Eva Garland who is joining us today and going to be giving this webinar on the supplemental documents segment on SBIR and STTR. So thanks for joining us. And Laura, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Lara Squarick, and I'm a grant writing consultant here at Eva Garland Consulting. And today we're going to talk about an aspect of grant preparation that doesn't always get a lot of attention, particularly content and preparation of the many supplemental documents that are required in addition to the main research proposal, and how to make these documents work in your favor. So, sorry, I'm just trying to advance the slide, which is not working. There we go. Okay, so today's webinar will be divided into three main sections. First is, what additional documents do you need to include in your submission? Second, how can these supplemental documents help enhance your proposal? And finally, what are the review criteria for these documents? So we'll begin by taking a look at what additional documents you need to include in your submission. Each agency has a different set of required supplemental documents. However, they all include some variation of the ones listed here. For most applications, you have the option of including letters of support, and we tend to think of these as required. It is possible to submit an application without these letters. However, this is an opportunity lost. The rest of the items on this list, biosketches, facilities, resources, and equipment, abstract or summary, and lay summary, are universally required. And all agencies require some form of human subjects or clinical trial documents for studies that include human subjects or samples, and a vertebrate animal plan if your study includes vertebrate animal experiments. Beyond these common elements, each agency also asks for their own specific set of supplemental documents, or has their own defined format for each of these. SBIR STTR applications for the Department of Defense can include what is called Volume 5, containing all supporting documents. Now, importantly, the content and requirements for Volume 5 depend on the DoD branch. As you can see here, there are a number of branches that do not accept Volume 5, some that will accept it but do not use it for evaluation of proposals, and others that will consider the contents when evaluating a proposal. Volume 5 includes letters of support, additional cost information, a funding agreement certification, technical data rights assertion, life cycle certification, and allocation of rights. As you can see within the DoD itself, the requirement and content of supplemental documents is variable, and it's therefore essential that you carefully read each funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, before you begin preparing your grant submission. This is the case for all agencies and all funding opportunities. And we recommend it even if you think you are familiar with the requirements, as these can sometimes change. So for the additional, in addition to the Volume 5 supporting documents, the DoD SBIR also requires a company commercialization report. The NIH has very specific formatting and content requirements for many of its supplemental documents. For instance, NIH Biosketches must follow a very specific format, and every few years they release a new template. In the upper right corner of the Biosketch template, there is a date indicating when the template expires, so make sure you check your template or any Biosketches provided by collaborators to make sure that the form has not expired. Another NIH-specific form is the Authentication of Key Resources document. This is a relatively new document that was introduced as part of the NIH's efforts to strengthen rigor and reproducibility and decrease lost time and resources due to misidentified reagents such as contaminated or incorrectly labeled cell lines. Key biological and/or chemical resources refers to established reagents or resources that will be used in the proposed research. This includes, but is not limited to, cell lines, specialty chemicals, antibodies, or other biologics. And those that require authentication are those that are likely to differ from laboratory to laboratory, or over time, or that vary in qualities or qualifications that could influence the research data. The authentication plan must include only a description of the methods proposed to authenticate key resources prior to use and at regular intervals, if appropriate. So for example, applicants proposing to use cell lines could describe the method they plan to use to verify the identity and purity of the cell lines, which might include short tandem repeat profiling and mycoplasma testing. The NSF takes a different approach to biosketches. And while the NIH biosketch is a maximum of 5 pages, NSF biosketches are a maximum of 2 pages, and there is not a prescribed format. Human subjects and vertebrate animals documentation is less extensive, but NSF asks for a list of current and pending support over the past 5 years, and a list of collaborators and other affiliations for all key personnel on the grant. Current and pending support must include the name of the grant, the agency, the amount, the time commitment, and role. For an NSF Phase 1 proposal, only 3 letters of support are allowed. And though the FOA states that they are optional, as I mentioned earlier, we have found that they are pretty much essential. The Department of Energy requests fewer documents. Biosketches here are only 2 pages, and they also ask for current and pending support. DOE also requests something called a level of effort worksheet and a Phase 1 commercialization plan. Some of the other agencies, particularly NSF and USDA, also require commercialization plans. However, these are included as part of the research plan itself and are not separate documents. The USDA NIFA program asks for some of the same documents as NSF and DOE, with additional agency-specific requirements for a conflict of interest form and collaborative arrangement justification, and the option of submitting a logic model and management plan. As for the letters of support, if something is encouraged, we recommend considering it as essential. It helps to demonstrate your commitment to the program and ensures that your application won't be viewed as sloppy or lacking. The last agency I'm going to mention is NASA, which requires a briefing chart and that you fill in the I-Corps opt-in form. Importantly, NASA does not accept letters of support for Phase 1 applications, demonstrating again why it is so important to familiarize yourself with the agency's specific requirements by reading the entire FOA. So next we're going to talk about how you can use the supplemental documents to enhance your proposal. Supplemental documents often have much more generous page limits than the research plan, so you can often leverage them to include information that you can't fit in your research plan, such as team expertise, details of vertebrate animal or human subject experiments, and military or agency relevance. Now, the key to understanding how to best make use of your supplemental documents is to understand the review process. As you read through the FOA, which you may have to do multiple times as you prepare your application, read the solicitation for review metrics. Often the specific review criteria are described, and make sure to include all the required information as specified by the solicitation. Also, make sure to make your application easy to review. Be concise. Consider using the exact headings that are presented in the FOA. You can use tables and figures in some of the supplemental documents. Lastly, emphasize and repeat key points and bold or underline a few key words if it will be helpful. As I mentioned earlier, we consider letters of support an essential component of a well-developed application and always include them, except when they're not allowed, such as for NASA. Identifying individuals to ask for letters of support should be done early during proposal preparation because it can take a long time for people to get the letters back to you. This is one of the components with the longest lead times, and you need to rely on others, so make sure that you give yourself as much time as possible. As a rule of thumb, we aim for 3 or more letters for Phase 1 proposals, or a maximum of 3 for NSF, and 6 for Phase 2. You want to use these letters to demonstrate that the problem you are trying to solve is important, that you are solving the problem in an innovative way, and that if successful, you will have a clear path to commercialization. Therefore, in phase 1, we recommend that you identify a key opinion leader who can validate the unmet need, a key stakeholder who can support that there is a market for your product, and an investor or future investor who can demonstrate interest in your approach, or at least in supporting solutions to address this particular need. To identify these individuals, leverage your connections. Have you spoken with someone at a conference? Do you know someone who used to work with a principal at a relevant investment firm? Do you have a local incubator that hosts networking events? Is there a relevant foundation that is working to solve the same problem? If all else fails, don't be afraid to reach out and cold call someone. Particularly for key opinion leaders, you can often find 1 or 2 individuals in the literature that are experts and send a short email that introduces your solution and asks if they will be willing to write a letter of support. When I do this, I always draft the letter first and attach it to the email. The less work you ask of someone, the more likely they are to help. Always offer to arrange a phone call or an in-person meeting if they are close, in case they want more information. If you spun out of a university, reaching out to someone from that same institution can also increase your odds of success. Ideally, you will draft each of the letters, both to make life easier for your letter writer and to ensure that they are hitting the points you most want to emphasize. In your letters, be specific. Reference the specific application and include a title. And ensure that each letter is different. Letters that are clearly form letters or that have the same first and last paragraph do not hold the same weight and significantly reduce impact. A strong letter contains a description of the problem your technology will address from the point of view of the letter writer and how your technology is distinct from other solutions. It also includes a brief bio of the letter writer to demonstrate why their opinion matters and outlines the specific interest the letter writer has in your technology. A clinician can discuss impact on patients, an investor can discuss potential investment return, and a key opinion leader can comment on projected impact of your technology on the field. Lastly, you want some form of commitment from the letter writer to help support your technology development. Ideally, this will be concrete, but often it can simply be a statement to the effect that they are looking forward to hearing more about your project as you move forward. All agencies require some form of abstract or summary that is to be written for a wide audience. This can generally be somewhat technical or scientific, but should be broadly accessible. Importantly, this is often the first thing a reviewer reads that outlines the problem you are addressing and your approach. Therefore, use this to set up expectations for the entire proposal. Be clear and ensure that you hit on the need, your solution, and the impact. Give the reviewers a concise preview so that they know what to expect. It is best to try and not just copy and paste the exact same info from your research strategy. Try to change it up some, as it can show reviewers a lack of effort if you just have the same introduction in every document. Lastly, the abstract and summary and the title are often made public upon award, so don't include anything that you don't want to disclose in this component. Some agencies also require a lay summary. For agencies that have a stakeholder representative on the review panel, and this includes the Department of Defense, these can be very important. You still want to highlight the problem, your solution, and the innovation, but in a manner that is accessible to anyone. I've provided an example here. The problem with manure recycling is moisture. Dewatering technology is too expensive, too complicated, and contaminates the material with nasty polymers. We thought about this problem: how to make manure dry enough to reprocess, cheap enough to make it economical, and simple enough that a farmer can run it. We realized plant roots. Plants pull moisture from soil, and they're solar powered. As they grow, they extend their root system, continually searching for moisture to fuel their growth. There has to be a way plant roots can be used to dry out manure, and it turns out there is. So as you can see from this lay summary, it hits upon all of the aspects that I talked about before. It states the problem, it states the solution and the value proposition, but it does so in a way that doesn't require a deep technical background. Biosketches should be included for all key personnel, including consultants and collaborators. Key personnel are defined as individuals who contribute to the scientific development or execution of a project in a substantive, measurable way. So students and technicians are generally not considered key personnel. However, individuals who have been hired because of a specific and unique set of skills should be considered key personnel. Now, the key for developing a strong biosketch is to highlight the experience of the team member with respect to the specific work to be performed. It's of course important to demonstrate that the team member has the right knowledge and training for the work, but it makes a much stronger case if you can use the biosketch to demonstrate that they have the right experience to get things done. If they have previously contributed to the commercialization of a similar technology, make this clear in the biosketch. While NSF and Department of Energy biosketches are only 2 pages long, NIH and DoD biosketches can be up to 5 pages long. A critical component of an NIH biosketch is the personal statement, which should be at least half a page and should be specific to the application. It should describe the individual's relevant experience and accomplishments and address why the individual is the right choice for this specific job. Some of you may be wondering what you should do if you only have one person on your team. Do you make up a name? Do you hire someone quick? We recommend that you find someone who may be willing to join the team at the time of award and include their biosketch. Program officers will usually be flexible if you need to replace someone with someone of equal experience, but you won't even have the chance to see if it's possible if you can't get past the review panel. For more tips on building a strong environment, please tune in for our next webinar for more tips on building a strong team, please tune in for our next webinar focused on building a strong team and environment to be presented on June 18th. Speaking of environment, facilities, equipment, and other resources is where you can demonstrate that you have the necessary resources, both physical and otherwise, to successfully complete the project. For some agencies, this is a single document, while others may separate equipment from facilities and resources. It's important that you highlight all of the relevant facilities and resources, including those that belong to any collaborators or are associated with a subaward. Many small companies these days are virtual, so what do you do in this situation? You never want to submit a blank document, and sometimes you do have to get a bit creative, but there's usually something you can expand on. For instance, if you are associated with an incubator, describe it and the associated resources. Do you have access to business development assistance, shared facilities? Do you have access to any relevant fee-for-service facilities or resources at a local university? If you just have a home office, at least describe your office. List your computer and printer and expand upon your local resources that you may tap to help with your business. If you have a nice lab, feel free to show pictures, especially if you have a unique equipment. Lastly, if you have a subaward or are using some other facilities, it's good to note if they are in close proximity, as reviewers see this as a positive. If not, it doesn't kill the application, but some reviewers may think it will hinder the project, so make sure to address how you will overcome any challenges due to distance. And as I mentioned earlier, the second half of our next webinar focuses on building a strong environment. Protection of human subjects is a specific suite of documents that is required by the NIH. However, any agency that accepts proposals that propose clinical trials or the use of human subjects or human samples will have some requirement for describing how you will protect the human subjects involved in your study. For the NIH, these documents are very extensive and require that you present recruitment tables outlining how many individuals of each sex, race, or ethnicity you expect to enroll or to have represented among your patient samples. As for every component, it is essential to read the requirements in the FOA early to ensure that you are addressing all the questions in your application. In the human subjects documents, you should provide a clear rationale for the different elements of your study design, including power analyses for sample size, a justification of sample population characteristics, inclusion and exclusion criteria, and a discussion of inclusion on the basis of sex, gender, race, ethnicity, and age. The NIH in particular has been moving to strengthen the inclusivity of clinical trials and studies, and you need to address sex as a biological variable by including adequate numbers of both men and women, unless you have a scientifically robust reason for excluding one gender. In addition, in January, the NIH implemented a new criteria, inclusion of individuals across the lifespan, to ensure that both children and the elderly are included when possible. Reviewers will take into account the adequacy of proposed protections in determining the overall impact score for your proposal, and the details of the study in determining the score for your approach. If your study involves vertebrate animal research, you will need to include a vertebrate animal plan that addresses why animal work is necessary and provides a clear rationale for your study design. Again, take note of what specific aspects must be addressed by carefully reading the FOA. As for human subjects, you need to provide a clear rationale and a power analysis supporting your sample size, describe your sample population characteristics, and describe efforts to address sex as a biological variable. In addition, you will need to include a description of procedures, including efforts to reduce pain and suffering. Reviewers will take into account the adequacy of your vertebrate animal plan when determining the score for approach. Importantly, when you do not have enough space in the research plan to expand on some of the details of your animal study, you can include them here, as the vertebrate animal plan does not have a page limit and is included in assessment of your approach. So as I've alluded to already, it's important to develop an understanding of the review criteria for these documents to maximize their impact. In developing any research proposal, it is essential to know your audience. Most review panels will consist of a mix of established academic and clinical faculty, as well as individuals who may not be experts in your field. For the Department of Defense, the review panels may also include a key stakeholder, a non-scientist who will be the ultimate end user of your technology. Each panel has a unique personality, and try to find out as much as you can about the panel before you apply. Some agencies publish the names and affiliations of standing members of the panel or of the panels from previous years. See how much information you can find and make sure to consider the viewpoint and needs of all the panel members when you craft your proposal. So what are the review criteria? Each agency has a different approach for developing a score. The NIH focuses on these 5 aspects: significance, innovation, team, environment, and approach, as well as assesses total impact. As you can see here, different supplemental documents can support or impact different review criteria. For instance, your letters of support will be considered when assessing innovation and approach, and you can use your summary abstract to drive home the significance of your innovation from the jump. Biosketches impact your team assessment, and facilities and resources can be used to bolster environment and approach. It's important to understand that you can present an incredible experimental design, but if you don't show that you have the facilities and/or team to execute it, then you're out of the running. These supplemental documents are easy ways to get some points, but if thought doesn't go into them, then they can also really hurt your score. As mentioned before, what you present in these documents, facilities, biosketches, vertebrate animal plan, human documents, should cover the work in the entire proposal, and not just what is being done by the small business. You need to cover the work being performed by collaborators and subboards and CROs. Even if all the vertebrate animal experiments are being performed by a contract research organization, you still need to provide an agency-specific format and include a description of the CRO's facilities, as well as demonstrate with your biosketches that you have someone on your team with the expertise and experience to oversee the animal experiments. The NIH review process assigns 3 primary reviewers to your application, who provide a score for each of the 5 criteria, as well as an overall impact score. Primary reviewers note the strengths and weaknesses for each criteria, as well as identify the criteria that were used to drive their score. Scores are averaged together and then multiplied by 10 to obtain an overall impact score. The NSF uses a different approach from the NIH. At the NIH, the review panel reigns supreme, while at the NSF, the program officer is heavily involved in application review and in the funding decision. Scores are presented as excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor, and generally only excellent and very good proposals are forwarded for funding. Proposals at the DoD are reviewed by government scientists and engineers who are experts in the field. The review criteria revolve around soundness, technical merit, and innovation of approach, the qualifications of the PI and supporting staff, and the potential for government or private sector application. Beyond this, though, what is really important at the DoD is that you are presenting a solution that meets their specific needs. So the DoD, SBIR, STTR FOAs tend to list extremely specific problems and the type of answer they're looking for. So make sure you are crafting your proposal in such a way that you are demonstrating that you can answer their specific problem. Now, the bottom line is that supplemental documents are important. You should read the FOA carefully, as the details vary from agency to agency and sometimes from year to year, and give the reviewers exactly what is asked for in the FOA. Lastly, you can use your supplemental documents to expand on multiple different impact areas of your proposal, including significance, innovation, approach, team, environment, and commercial prospects. Lastly, remember to focus on your audience and use the supplemental documents to tailor the tone of the proposal to reach your intended audience within the specific granting agency. Please join us at our next webinar for a deeper dive into building a strong team and environment. This will be held on June 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can register on the KY Innovation website. I'm happy to take any questions. You should be able to type questions into a chat box if you have them. We'll give it maybe 2 more minutes for people to type up questions if they have them, and if not, we will end the webinar. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today.